Welcome to our 22nd podcast. Today we'll be talking about downsizing. What's the one thing you can do today to downsize with humanity, if that's the case in your organization? Keep listening to find out. Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces. Hello again, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Thank you for joining us today. My name again is Rich Cruz. I'm an OD consultant, organizational development consultant, and I'm joined here today by my co-hosts, Ben Kleinman. Hi, Ben.
Hello. Acronyms right out of the bat. I love it.
Oh man, did I really? It's just one of those things that pops out. And Cheryl Volpe. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, Rich.
How are you?
Hey, Ben. Hi, everyone. Great.
You can't escape the acronyms. They're just there. And today we thought we would talk about, and I'm just going to say, before we start, trigger warning here, right? I mean, and in all honesty, this can be an emotionally charged episode, right? Because we are going to be talking about something that's on a lot of people's minds today, which is downsizing. So, for those who don't know, what's the best way that we can actually define downsizing? Just so we get that out there, folks.
I was just going to ask Rich if we had a working definition of downsizing as opposed to individual firing or mass layoffs. Is that different from downsizing or letting go of a whole team or a restructuring? Is there something that we want to kind of latch onto in the definition there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Cheryl, do you have any? I don't have a specific definition, but I can talk a little bit about some of the legal stuff that goes in there. But I don't think we're going to get that deep into it. Cheryl,
Sure.
what did you say about that?
I think Ben has set the stage for it already. It's that larger scale layoff of a lot of people. It could be due to a business model change, a larger shift, more tectonic plate shift in a company, as opposed to, a trim here or a trim there for different economic reasons. This is a larger picture unemployment situation.
Right. Yeah. So this is letting employees go kind of, on a mass scale, right? For a variety of reasons.
I like that. That's good. And typically it would have something to do with the business cycle or jettisoning a line of business altogether or a massive restructuring, globalizing something that was regional or vice versa. And to me, then that makes it feel less personal. When I think of individuals getting fired, I think of something that is more personal or obviously more individual, but it's either something with performance or it's something with clash of just not a good meshing of the gears of how that person fits into culture, even if performance is okay. So it's to me, it's less individual, less personal, and more just, it's a business thing. Sorry, kind of a thing. Yeah. And maybe that's a good, a fuzzy but good working definition for our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, and to kind of support that, layoffs.fyi, which is an information source about this type of thing, more than 100 or just about 100,000 employees in the first 6 weeks of 2023 lost their positions, right? So it's like you said, it's not like a personal attack on somebody. It's a business decision that ended up happening, and it's affected a lot of people. And we've seen this throughout the rest of this year. We've experienced this through the pandemic, various other times, that pesky recession that we've gone back to a few times in 2008, right? So, yeah, we've seen this a few times in our lives already.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder, maybe this starts to get into the meat of our conversation. I wonder if it is something that, at least as a business, leadership can try to position as it's less personal. It's not about you. It's about the industry, the macro cycle, the business itself, whatever.
Sure.
Is that still going to resonate as less personal for those people who are being let go, for people who are being transitioned off, or I guess offboarded is a term I often hear. Is it still going to feel less personal? And does that matter?
So, according to the APA, the American Psychological Association, people are going to take it personally. It affects them in a very personal way.
Even if you tell them in lots of different ways and you have the right messaging and the right tone and all that, even if you said, it's not you, we still like you as a person, we still like you as an employee, we just can't do that thing that we used to do. Mm-hmm. It still is, the impact is still very personal, as if you were firing that person and only that person individually.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's right. And there's a lot of ways that a company will try to make that manageable, as personal as it is, which could include early retirement. There's still a pension plan kind of thing there. Severance packages, whether they're voluntary or not. Those are things that management can do to keep the humanity in that massive shift into the personal lives of the people who are losing their jobs. But there are cases, of course, that even that is not a benefit being offered.
Right. Sure. Yeah. This PhD Carl Van Horn from the APA, this article that I was reading here, says that losing a job and being unemployed for a long period of time is a psychological trauma and a financial trauma that are both intertwined. So whether it's, like you said, early retirement, or this is going to be something that's going to be a long-term, even a short-term. I was laid off once and I got hired by somebody else within like 3 weeks. Not long-term, didn't have to collect unemployment, but there's quite a few people that are out for long-term unemployment. Mm-hmm. is very high right now.
Sure.
It's a statistically high number, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Mm-hmm. But he goes on to say that while we can't affect the economic problem or solve the economic problem, there is an opportunity to help people cope and manage themselves through this, and avoid some of the risks to mental health, and some of there's even some of the financial health that some organizations can do to steer people in the right direction so that they can file for benefits early.
Right. I do want to say, before we switch into some of those benefits, Rich, you make a really good point. Many scholars and practitioners equate the news of being laid off with a death, essentially. In the stages of grief, that trauma is very similar. You can't believe it at first, and then you need to process, well, was it me? Or what really happened? Could it have been different? Who made these decisions? All of that anger, grief, denial, negotiation, those can come very quickly with this situation.
For sure.
Wow.
For sure. Yeah, I actually recall there was an article that really discussed those stages of grief. ironically, I was in a funeral home when I saw this thing in Stages of Grief, and then when I left, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about this, where people have to go through all of that, to the point of where there's acceptance. But the nice part is it's not over. Like, we can still get employment, we can still get back on track. But yeah.
What do you both feel is the obligation, or is there an obligation for companies to do anything to do right, quote unquote, to do right by their employees that they're letting go as part of this downsizing or larger dismissal of workers? Is there, because I think back, 100 years ago, companies didn't have anything to do with any of that. I don't think it was talked about. I don't think any of these things were recognized. Companies just let entire workforces go. And it was like, hey, good luck to you. And you had people getting very upset about all that. Is there, obviously society's changed, culture has changed. Is there something that companies now, there's sort of a baseline obligation that most companies should be meeting in terms of these types of things?
Before we answer that, let's take a quick break.
Twirling mustache.
And we'll come right back and discuss that, because that's going to be something meaty. So we'll be right back.
For Fortune 100 companies and small businesses alike, Harborside Strategy helps design and implement customized precision change management initiatives. From new organizational structures to new processes to new systems, we help you clarify the reason and urgency around your change in language that will resonate across your organization. With that clarity and a common purpose, we use the power of stories and blended communication methods to reinforce your goals and keep everyone focused and aligned. All of it tailored to your people, your organization, your needs. Contact Principal Ben Kleinman today to learn more at www.harborsidestrategy.com. Again, that is www.harborsidestrategy.com.
And we're back. So we're talking about downsizing, and Ben was just asking. Go ahead, Ben. What were you saying? It was
So for people who might be joining late, essentially we're talking about downsizing and recognizing that there is a sense that downsizing is akin to experiencing death or a significant loss, that people who are being downsized feel that very personally, even if it's not meant personally by the organization. And the question on the table is something along the lines of, is there an obligation now, given our culture, given our society, that organizations have to the people that they are letting go? Is there some baseline level of financial or job retraining or psychological support that they should be offering?
Sure.
I think the question goes a long way to define the corporate culture or the ethical culture in any organization. And if that is a value that the leadership has prioritized, this would be more obvious in the way they treat the people whose jobs are ending. If it is economically viable, in the cases where it's not, leadership could very well then say, well, the reason it's happening at all is because there is no financial cushion here to make this easier for anyone.
Sure.
Right.
All right.
Which is the worst case scenario. Yeah, go ahead, Rich.
Oh no, I see actually. So SHRM, another acronym, Society for Human Resources Management, right?
Do you have your crab?
I don't have my crab with me. Shermy?
He's at the shore.
I should, yeah.
Is Shermy molting?
He's indisposed right now. but we will see.
He's in a tide pool.
Working on some stuff. Yeah. But Sherm has put together a pretty good list. It's a reduction in force or RIF strategy and selection checklist, which I think really, high level highlights some of the things that organizations can and arguably should do. So, and this is goes along with what we talk about in change a lot, right? Identify the goals and objectives, create a plan. The hard part, one of the hard parts, selecting who's going to be RIF'd, right? Reviewing the federal and state laws around all that. So you're going to hear a lot of legal counsel that's going to happen through there, especially the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification or WARN Act regulations and being compliant with that. If that's something that your organization is tied to.
And I have to put in that I don't think any of us are legal experts. So take that for what it's worth. I know that anywhere there's unions involved, there are lots of regulations, especially in Europe and other countries where unions have a very prominent legal entitlement structure. That just is something that y'all have to be very careful with.
Absolutely.
But you can still do it with humanity, which is why we're here talking about this today.
And we can still talk about it loosely without giving any financial advice or the insinuation that we are at all experts in that area.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, I'll give financial advice. Write me a check.
There you go, folks. Write Ben Kleinman a check today.
BEN.
I love it. Yes.
Well, the last part that they outline here is to determine what those, if it's applicable, what a severance package looks like. But the most important thing, and this is across everything that I found in the literature, right, is having an effective communication plan where you're coming at it with compassion and empathy, and at the same time you're being pragmatic.
Communication.
I love that. It always comes back to communication. And I think something that is maybe implied in there is transparency and being transparent about why this is happening, about what kinds of services or support you as a organization, or maybe even as an individual manager or as a leader can offer these folks. Certainly that seems to try to help. Goes a long way.
Yeah. And it's not just the communication, the push communication to everybody. It's also listening to them and having them, you have to kind of put on as my my mentor Alan Landers says, right, put on your tomato suit. In the vaudeville days, you would not wear your best suit if you were going out on stage, because somebody was likely going to throw pelt you with tomatoes if you didn't do well on stage, right? So he says, put on your tomato suit. You kind of have to do that, put on that proverbial tomato suit to deal with the feedback that you're going to get, because you're going to have some negative backlash there.
Do you think that most organizations are training their leaders or managers that are going to get those tomatoes, or even if it's not tomatoes, they're just going to be in a position where they're going to have to listen, and they're going to have to listen very, very empathetically? Do you think a lot of organizations are training their leaders and managers? Or are they supporting them in that way? Or is that still something that is an opportunity for organizations to provide that level of training and support so that those people can listen without it overwhelming them, without it jadifying? I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah, that sounds
Take
right.
jadifying.
I'll buy that.
Well,
Jadifying.
when you think about leadership development, how to lay your team off is not usually on that agenda, right? So this is a measure of crisis management, right? This,
Maybe in some ways, yeah.
yeah. And it is also one of the reasons why a leadership position tends to be a more lucrative level, because these are very, very difficult conversations to have for managers that are concerned with doing it with humanity in an empathetic way. Maybe just having to listen, right? It's not managing a project, it's changing someone's life. So, although I don't want to stray too far away from the idea that we started with, downsizing on a massive scale is different than those one-on-ones where you've got to let someone go from across your desk in a leadership position.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Although the question remains, is there training for this? Yes, there is. But is it a part of the regular business as usual? Not typically. It would come in that planning stage that Rich was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's good. That goes back to intentional and thoughtful planning of a downsizing, as opposed to that crisis management mentality where it's a much more sort of blitz of activities and less intentional, less thoughtful planning, more reactive, I guess.
Right. And risk management too, because when you
sure, you get into that. Yeah.
When you are minimizing your resources to get work done, the people that are left behind potentially have a lot more work to do. There's a whole shift in their scope of work, and will they adjust to that? Right? It's a very risky period, even when there is a good plan or a good justification from leadership to make this massive change in their staffing. The risk also goes up. So it's risk management and crisis management.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you have to manage the expectation, the feelings, the just how people behave, on for both those who are being riffed and then the ones who are the survivors, right? The ones who are staying on staff.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was just going to say, not to tease too much, but I think we're looking at a future episode on those who remain after a downsizing. So surviving a downsizing is its own thing. It's a whole thing in its own right. So that's all good material to discuss and really rich, fertile ground for discussion.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's luckily we have research and evidence-based, I don't want to say protocols, but at least guidelines to be able to help with dealing with the people that remain on staff, because there's precedent, there's recent precedent, so a lot of the frameworks and the research that have been used, we have this evidence to support how we manage that going forward. So, in fact, SHRM has a pretty good article. I may put this in the notes here, from 2022 on supporting employees who remain after layoffs. It says, "Be ready to hear what they are saying." Again, feedback loop. Don't leave managers on their own. So, those executives, support them, train them, help them through all of that, because they're going to have their own feelings too. It's they're people as well. Be ready to answer, how will this affect me? And keep the employees engaged, and at the same time you have to manage their workload's probably going to go up. How do we keep them motivated to continue
And not burn out.
Yeah. Very real risks.
I'm wondering if maybe we take a break and then we come back and try to bring up some ideas that people who are in the midst of a downsizing or who are planning a downsizing can start to think about how they structure it, how they carry it out, what are maybe our top 3 or 5 ideas or suggestions for how to do that with humanity.
I love it. Yeah, we opened with what's one thing, but I think there's not just one thing. So
I'm happy to go with the one thing, but I always get nasty looks when I say boil it down to one thing. So
it's hard. It's really hard. So
I've given you 3 to 5.
Yeah, we'll take a quick break, and when we return, we'll come back with some tips. See you in a second.
Are you struggling with high employee turnover, low morale, or poor communication within your team? Do you find it challenging to foster collaboration and trust among your employees? Do you have resistance to some of the recent changes you've made in your business? You're not alone. According to sources such as Forbes and the Society for Human Resources Management, many business owners face these same challenges. They know that success comes from a strong workplace culture, but they don't always know where to start. If this sounds like you, it's time to take action. Our experienced consultants stand ready to work with you to develop customized solutions. Don't wait any longer. Take our quick culture scorecard today and discover where you can improve. Work Balance Consulting, where workplace culture meets success. Visit our website at www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard and start your journey toward a better workplace today. Again, visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com/scorecard.
And we're back. So we've been talking about downsizing, the mass, whether it's layoffs or, the condensing of an organization, and how can we do this with humanity? And we're now going to talk about some actual actionable things you can do. So what do you got on, what do you have on your mind?
Communication. I know we can't say it enough and it sounds redundant, but having the respect for your staff to give them that timely communication in as far advance as possible, which is also a risk for leadership. There may be a mass exodus if they announce that this is about to happen, and they could have a drastic drop in resources before they're ready for it. But that is an indication of leadership that respects their people. And this should be a goal in every organization. As much time and transparency, as you were saying, Ben, as reasonably practical, because there will be situations where it's important to keep some things at the leadership table until they're true or proven or viable, right? But that communication with your people, which gives a sense of agency to the people, which is part of the humanity that you can add to a situation like this.
Yep.
That's my one thing. There you go.
There you go.
I've done it.
And to dovetail onto that, right? I think there's on that communication. There's both sides of that, and there's the group announcements and how we deal with the organization as a whole. But there's a lot of research and these guidelines from SHRM that really highlight the individualization of talking to each RIFT member, right? Each person who's on that selection list, and the work groups that are affected, right? Individually, to really elicit information from them, help them to vent, but also to help them get those resources.
Right.
As well.
And connected to all of that too, Rich, and to your point, it's important too, if there is a mass communication and a lot of people are addressed through a town hall, for example, that there's a follow-up resource that individuals can reach out to, and it can't just be a phone number and a voicemail. Leadership has to plan for that resource to be truly available.
Yeah.
For the stages.
By that, I'm sorry, Cheryl, by that, do you mean a lot of times bigger organizations have some sort of employee crisis hotline or employee support hotline? So you're thinking of that type of thing?
That's exactly it. And that has to be legitimate and dependable and real.
Yep. Don't depend on some YouTube video that you're going to, and I say that jokingly, but in all honesty, some people do that. Like, there's this resource, and watch this, and maybe you'll feel better.
Yeah, it's called Harmonious Workplaces.
Yeah,
and you can just
do that too.
I'm so glad you said that. I was thinking that too.
Yeah. There's 3 friendly people who are trying to make everything better. Just here's the link.
There you go.
But you're right, Rich. Sometimes it's like, here, watch this and then call me if you can get through.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
No, but there are mental health resources that are available. In fact, on the Harmonious Workplaces blog, there's a couple of blogs there where I highlighted some mental health resources that can help you through these types of things. So there's a lot of self-care that can be and should be done, and arguably leaders can and should point people in those directions.
We should put that in the show notes, Rich.
Can do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So I think what I'm hearing a lot of is communication and showing respect for the people being downsized or riffed. And I like, Cheryl, what you were saying about trying to help them navigate through these stages of grief, Rich, that you were talking about, but help them find some agency. And I think where someone is able to hook on to having some agency when they're ready for that, that can then help them be in a more powerful position, a more proactive, more positive place to be in terms of, this has happened, I can't change it, but I have all these great skills, I have all this support behind me, wellness support, corporate support, financial support, whatever that looks like. And now I can go forward and take my next step. And I want it to be X, Y, and Z because I've had help processing where I want to go next in my career. And so that kind of thing can be super helpful. And, the other thing that I was really liking what you were saying, this idea of multiple communication mechanisms. There's usually some sort of group, large group, memo goes out, this is happening. And then there's going to be this chain of communication. We've talked a lot about using lots of different communication mechanisms and vehicles in terms of explainer videos or individual meetings. Those can all come into play in the right way. And where this is going is that there needs to be some amount of time spent up front being thoughtful from a very senior leadership level. You have to think about all these things. You can't just dive into your downsizing because it's going to have so many ripple effects and it's going to impact people personally, whether you want it to or not. The folks are going to feel this very personally, like we've talked about. It's experiences of death. And then also at some point it impacts your brand. If it's a big enough company with big enough changes, big enough layoffs, it's going to impact your brand, and you want to minimize the negative impact. You want to make it seem like you are doing above and beyond what is the baseline we've talked about necessary, so that you as a brand emerge stronger, not just financially if you're doing this for a financial reason, but in the eyes of the society. Yeah. And so I think that's the one thing that I would add in terms of the things we've talked about, is just being thoughtful, and then that helps wrap in all that. And I was thinking, as a middle manager, you're not necessarily deciding the company's going to be downsized. You're just in the midst of all of this. You get the memo maybe at the same time as everyone else. And now you're in this position of, rock on one side, leadership is saying there's going to be downsizing. Hard place on the other side, your team is probably being impacted. Maybe there are significant members of your team being let go. Maybe you are part of the being let go. Are there a few things that we want to tease out for those people, specifically for middle managers, that they can do and maybe should do as a middle manager that's different from someone who's being let go?
One thing I can offer is, and this stems from some material I've read recently on the power of communities. So if you belong to an association and you've been able to develop a network within that association, even if you have a group within your company of other managers, of other peers, building some level of support that way from other people can really help. And in the same way, people who have been displaced can find communities fairly quickly. You reach back into your network, talk to the people there are plenty of support groups within churches, synagogues, city halls. So if you just even do a quick internet search, you can find support groups that really can help you make that transition easier, because trying to do it on your own is a tough thing, whether you're in management or you're a line worker.
For sure. Cheryl, do you have a top tip or suggestion for those middle managers who might be in that rock hard place?
The community that Rich is talking about is the number one idea. Also within, and Rich, you did touch on this too, the micro teams within the company where you are. Just find others that are in your exact position and communicate with those people, and just, that brotherhood going through a terrible situation can be the strength you need. Just knowing that you're not alone going through it.
Among the most human things that we have is our ability to connect to others and find support. That's what people have done, with tribes throughout the ages.
That's right. And sisterhood, of course.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was thinking too, something that you had said earlier is this idea of a tomato suit, Rich, but this idea that as a middle manager, you might be the person with the least amount of agency in the organization, because you're getting told what to do from on high. You're getting yelled at or screamed at about losing your job from people on your team. You might just be like overwhelmed with incoming negativity and incoming problems that it may not be your job to solve, but you just have to listen and try to do that with humanity and empathy. And that can be really hard. So I like these ideas of looking for support from other managers within your organization, industry associations, obviously, sharing as much as you can without breaching confidentiality, finding that brotherhood, trying to align with groups as much as you can. That can be very helpful. And then just recognizing that's why you get paid the big bucks, is just listen and not try to solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. And middle managers are also on that scale that we've talked about on at least 2 other episodes for us. We talked about, from the laissez-faire transactional to transformational leaders. That applies to middle managers too. And that's a style, and that's a culture thing too. And it's not going to suddenly be this transformational solid rock of support in crisis. If anything, it will be less so, so
right.
It does depend on what you're dealing with in terms of personality and skill sets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's tough. It's a tough spot to be in. And those middle managers are not going to be getting that planning and training necessarily. They may be kept in the dark with everyone else.
Yeah. But that's where some of that, like we were talking about before, some of that thoughtfulness can come in, so that as an organization realizes it has to downsize, and as they're ready to start breaking that news throughout the organization, part of it can be, middle managers, we're going to give you this extra support, this extra training, this extra toolkit that you can use for people who are going to be let go. Whether you're, as a middle manager, whether you're being let go or not, we're still going to give you this extra layer of training and support so that you can help manage that process for people that report into you. Again, that goes back to, if the company has any decency and humanity, then they would try to do that as much as they could. Right. But I fear we're treading back into waters of surviving and downsizing. So maybe that's.
I was just going to say, I think we've teed it up for our next conversation.
For next time,
we talk about surviving that downsizing internally. So, thanks a million for joining us again, folks. We hope that you found a lot of value in our discussion today. We will have some of the resources in the show notes on the audio podcast and in the video, and eventually it'll be on our blog as well at harmoniousworkplaces.com.
And would love any feedback that you'd care to share. What did we completely botch? What are things that resonated, and what are things you've seen that work well? Would love to hear.
Would love it.
Yep. And so until next time, folks, make change your friends. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network. And remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode. To contact Rich or Cheryl, please visit www.workbalanceconsulting.com. To connect with Ben, find him on LinkedIn or visit at www.harborsidestrategy.com.